Welcome to the Film Riot podcast. I'm Ryan Conley, and today on the show we have Justin Baldoni. Justin is an actor, a director, and a producer. His first feature film was 5 Feet Apart, which we're going to talk about, and his latest is Clouds, which is on Disney Plus right now and is a really beautiful film. He's also been in plenty of television, including the award-winning Jane the Virgin. And today we're really talking about his path as a filmmaker, his career overall, and then into his latest film, Clouds, why he made the film, why it was so important for him to make it, and how he was able to stay so honest and bring a true story of that magnitude to the screen in the best way possible. But before we get into that, I do want to thank today's sponsor that helped make this episode happen, and that's Nanlite, who strive to design lighting products that provide image makers with new possibilities and push them to expand their creative horizons as they vow to expand their own. And their lights are fantastic. I use them all the time. I've shown it on the show several times how the entire setup that I shoot in my office for the weekly episode is pretty much entirely lit by the Nanlights. Their tube lights are incredible. Pretty much all of their gear is really fantastic. Just the lack of needing gels with RGB lights like a lot of the ones that they have is some of my favorite lights to use. They're extremely well built and extremely high quality, and they stand behind all their products and provide the best technical support available so you can accomplish your vision effortlessly. So definitely jump over to filmriot.com/podcast and find links there for Nanlite, or just go to Nanlite's website and just, get all the things. But with that out of the way, now let's jump right into it with Justin. Well, starting from the top, where I really like to start from everyone, just because I think knowing the inception of, where an artist came from is really useful for people and helps shape things. So I'm always curious to find out, what was the moment that you personally realized you wanted to be in this? You wanted to be a filmmaker.
It's so funny when you ask me that question, so many things come to mind. And I don't know if there was one moment. If I'm being really honest, I think it felt so far away from me that it wasn't ever like a reality, maybe like a distant dream.
Right.
My dad was in the film business, not as much on the creative side. He helped start and launch the product placement industry, which is kind of like where, if you don't know what that is, if you watched movies growing up and you saw like a brand or like a United Airlines or like a Pepsi or something, my dad was one of the guys who was the middleman between the brands and the studios. Right.
Sure.
And so I grew up like, I'd go to movies and my dad would say, "Hey son, I did that, or I put that there." Or, or he'd like represent companies, like Diodora, and get my, get my soccer team like free uniforms or something. But I remember I would get to go to movies with him at a really young age and have this kind of like visceral emotional experience. Like I remember seeing E.T. and just like feeling like how big the world was, and also how, I remember like this feeling of knowing how like the dark side of humanity, but also like what's possible and how love can transcend, species at that point. And these massive concepts for me as a kid, I think just kind of cemented themselves in my heart somewhere. And my dad actually took me at one point. We went to the opening of the E.T. ride. I think I was maybe 3 at Universal Studios or 4 years old. And I remember Spielberg in front of us. And I don't even know how, because I was so young. But I remember my dad saying, like, "That's Steven Spielberg. He directed E.T." And I still have that memory in me.
That's amazing.
And it's so funny because recently at my studio, I actually hired, we just brought over Andrew Kaloff, who's our president of production, who was over at Amblin. And I don't know, I can't explain it except like it's been in me for that long. And then when I grew up, my dad would give me his broken camera, and it had like this big green line through it.
Right.
And I would shoot, and I'd shoot movies.
Yeah.
I'd like make my own little movies, and I would always document things and shoot things. And in high school, that became my love language. When I was a nerd. I was a jock, but I was also a nerd. I was kind of an ugly duckling. Like girls didn't really like me. I was always in the friend zone. So I would come up with like these grand gestures of ways to like express my love. So I'd make them like music videos that were just the worst thing ever. And there was no editing software back then. So I would just like find my cut and, stop the camera and then watch it back and then forward it and then get it to the right place and then film again.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, with all my friends. Like we made, God, I remember making like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys videos and like, doing like all these like little jump cuts and putting my hand on the camera and, all the things that people on TikTok are doing now.
Yeah.
But with a really shitty, well, back then it was a cool camera.
Yeah.
That my dad used to film my soccer games. And I spent more time playing with that camera, I think, than he did filming my games, because, there's only one game a week and I had that camera in my hand every other day. So yeah, I think it was always in me. It's my senior year. I turned in a alternate ending of The Great Gatsby as a movie instead of doing the book report.
Amazing.
And luckily they still gave me an A. It was a language for me. So I don't know if there was one moment. I just think it was always in me. But again, I was in Oregon. I grew up, went from 10 to 18 in Oregon. So it just felt so far away that I just never really thought it would happen, which is why even talking to you is just always a weird thing. I'm like, am I a filmmaker? I guess I am. I've made a
I'd
couple
say
movies.
so. Yeah. I would definitely say you are. I relate so much to that, man. I grew up the same way, like VHS cameras, doing all the cuts in the camera. I remember my dad upgraded our camera to one that would put on a widescreen bars. I'm like, oh my God, this is cinema. I'm making cinema just because it had the widescreen bars on it.
Dude, ours had, I remember I remember researching cameras when I was like 13 or 14. And one of the cameras he bought, he was also I got my love of tech stuff from him. It was like a 3 CCV camera, but in it had these different filters.
Yes.
And one of them, it had an old movie filter, which was really a sepia tone. And I remember looking at it and I was like, wait, what makes this look different? Why does this look more like cinema? And there was a widescreen. And I realized that it was because they were changing the frame rate, but I didn't know what a frame rate was.
Yeah.
And there was a feature called the flash feature. I don't know if any of your cameras had this, but it was like,
I don't think
you could adjust this dial, and it was essentially a frame per second tool, except it was only meant to do a flash. So it kind of looked like still images.
Oh, okay.
And if I adjusted it all the way up, it changed the frame rate just enough so that it felt like 24 frames per second.
Right.
But my 14-year-old brain didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that it looked closer to what I thought a movie would look like.
Totally. Or you could put titles in it just by hitting that one button over and over and over to get all the right characters in.
So cool. So cool. Those were the days.
I know.
Of old people.
It's so true. But eventually it went into acting. Was that kind of your first breakthrough into the industry, is through that acting path?
Yeah, man. Again, none of it was planned. That's all I can say. When I was 20, I was heartbroken. I just gotten cheated on and dumped by my first girlfriend, love of my life. And I was heartbroken, and I had left college and transferred. I was transferring to LA. I was actually on the track team at Long Beach State, and I had moved to Santa Monica College, and my dad had one last piece of an office in LA, but it was really like a tiny studio apartment in the Wilshire kind of Homeby area. And I remember staying in this tiny studio apartment, which was his office, and there was nothing there. It was just a couch. And I met a manager basically who was like, "Hey, are you an actor?" Because I don't know why he said that. I think he was hitting on me or something. But as it turned out, I think later he was. But and I said, no, but I would. I'd taken one acting class at Long Beach State, and I really liked it because that's where the cute girls took acting class there. And I was like, this sounds fun. And then 3 months later, I was auditioning and booked my first Hallmark movie where I had the world's worst Italian accent. And that kind of began this little bit of a career. But again, I didn't think it was real. I grew up where actors were like gods to me. So, I would go to visit a set that maybe my dad was working on, but they didn't know who my dad was. And they were just over there, and, nobody can talk to the actors or touch the actors. And I just remember looking at them like, oh my God, this is royalty. The fact that I could be one of those people was just impossible to me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it happened. But really what I found that my love was I started directing music videos on the side. And so I started to, when I got on sets and I started taking it all in. And I remember the first day I went on the set, I didn't even know what a mark was. They put down a mark and they had to explain to me, this is where you stand. And I'm like, what do you mean this is where I stand? But what if I want to go there? They're like, you can't go there because the camera won't see you. And I remember I had to learn about it on set. And then I just was like, well, what is that thing? Well, what is that? What's that called? That's a C-stand. How does that work? Or what's that light do? And I tried to educate myself on everything, what every role was, what gaffers did, what grips did, what a best boy was. Why is a best boy called a best boy? But that's a woman. All the things that we don't ever talk about or think about. I just was absorbing it as an actor, which is probably why my performances weren't so good, because I cared more about what's happening behind the cameras. And then I just kind of used that as momentum in some ways to really find things that I loved. I always tell people, you got to do what you love. If you love acting, great. If you love acting and directing, there's no one says you can't do both.
Yeah.
So I used acting as my education for what I really felt drawn to do, which was to tell stories as a filmmaker.
Yeah, that's just an amazing way to give yourself a form of film school, by doing and everything. And you did the music videos on the side, and then eventually you started directing for TV, right?
Well, my journey was it was a little bit different. I started with a music video actually that I paid for myself. My friend had written this song. It was actually a Baha'i prayer. I'm a Baha'i, and basically it was this prayer that he put to music. And I remember hearing it, and like a lot of filmmakers, and I'm sure you're the same way. Whenever you hear a song, you see the story,
Yeah.
or you see all the possibilities of a story. And because music was such a I was a radio DJ at a radio station in high school. So, I'd go to school, and then I would go essentially like be on the radio and have my kind of talk show and play music, and actually learn how to edit by editing audio for that radio show.
That's awesome.
But music was such a big part of me, and I would always see the images that could go to various songs, which is why, like, growing up, I always watched like making of the music video on MTV.
Yeah.
Or like those were the shows I always wanted to watch. It was like I just wish that binging was possible back then, because all I wanted to do was learn and watch how people made things. So when it came time when my friend wrote this song and I heard it, I had just done this tiny little independent movie, and I'd become friends with the DP. And I asked him, I said, can I make this as a music video? And he said, sure. So I scrounged together like a couple $1,000s, and I asked for every favor in the book, and we went and I made this music video. And it was my first time really directing something. I made music videos all the time for friends, like, as jokes, but never like a real video with like real lighting and things. And it changed my life because I realized that my unique gift was capturing emotion. The unique thing I brought as a filmmaker, I learned on that experience, was that even though I didn't have the language, or I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, I knew how to make people feel via moving images.
Right.
I could capture it. Other people are great with comedy. Other people are great with action. I was just great with small, distilled, emotional moments. And that's how it started for me. So I started directing more music videos, and then I started directing commercials, and then eventually documentaries. And then that's what led me kind of on the path that I'm on now.
Gotcha. And then that moved into your first feature, which was 5 Feet Apart.
Yeah, 5 Feet Apart was the first one.
How did that one come about?
Well, 5 Feet Apart came about. So let me back up a little bit. I came up with this idea for a documentary series called My Last Days when I was 26, which was basically a documentary series that followed incredible people through all walks of life that were living with a chronic or terminal illness.
Yeah.
And the idea was to find a way to impact and move and touch somebody's heart by showing them that this could happen to them, by that we needed to stop otherizing these people that like got cancer or hurt or who got a terminal diagnosis, that it wasn't just other people that it happened to, it happens to all of us. And eventually we're all not going to be here anymore. So it's about, what are we doing with our lives? Like, what are we choosing? How are we spending our time? And knowing how I have been and knowing how so many young people are, I wanted to help people stop procrastinating to become the people they want to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Today. So the idea, we hear live for the moment, or you don't have to, or live like you're dying. What does that actually mean? And so the idea was I wanted to create a show around that, and I did. And it ended up becoming a big hit on YouTube. And I found this kid, Zach Sobiech, who I'm sure we'll talk about. This is my latest movie. And through that process, I really learned that what I really wanted to do was help shift people's perspective on life, whether it be TV or documentary or film. And shortly after that, I fell back into acting. I got this TV show, Jane the Virgin, and I started my company. And I decided to use this opportunity, this privilege that I was given as an actor, as a lead on a TV show that the industry watched, to try to create my dream, which was to build a company that tells these important, impactful stories and makes a difference in the world. So, of course, my show was on the CW. It was produced by CBS Films. I had a chance to sit next to the people that run that at the Golden Globes the year we were nominated. And of course, my goal wasn't to be an actor. It was to tell these stories. And so I said, hey, I'd love to come in and talk with you guys sometime. So they thought they were meeting with me as an actor, but they later found out they were meeting with me as a director. And I became friends with the executive there. And one day I called him because I was shooting the next season of My Last Days, which also aired on the CW. Because once I got the show, I said, hey, young people watch your network. Let's give them some substance. Let's give them something that will make them think. And they said, yeah, let's do it. So they bought My Last Days. We put it on the network. And through that process, I met a young woman named Claire Wineland who had cystic fibrosis. And Claire became a little sister to me and a dear friend, and loved her deeply. And she told me that two people with CF can't touch. And the second she told me that, I asked her, I made her repeat what she said because I was so confused. She says, no, yeah, two people with CF can't touch because they can infect each other with unique bacteria and it can actually kill them. And I had her walk me through the whole thing. And I said, oh my God. And I saw the movie. I said, this is a movie. I said, this is a totally different Romeo and Juliet. What if instead of the Montagues and the Capulets, it was an illness that was keeping them apart?
Yeah.
And what does love look like if you can't touch? And like this idea that we have to stay 6 feet apart from people, and that in the movie she takes back a foot. I'm like, this is amazing. Little did I know we'd be living in the world now where everybody has to be 6 feet apart. But it was just this. It was something that I'd never seen before. And again, I'm a sucker for love. Romeo and Juliet is one of my favorite, Shakespearean plays of all time. And we've seen it done so many times, but it'll never get old, and there'll always be another version of it. And I wanted to make the version, but I also wanted to raise awareness for cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
Because it was such an underfunded and unknown disease. Most people thought it was MS. They heard CF, they thought it was MS. So I went to CBS Films and I said, hey guys, what do you think of this? I think we could do this. I don't think this is a big movie. And I think if we do it right, it could be really powerful. And somehow they said yes. And I was off to produce and direct my first film, and found these amazing writers, and developed the screenplay from scratch. I then had the idea I knew that CBS was also owned by a parent company that also owns Simon and Schuster. So I asked if we could turn the script into a book instead of the other way around, because I believed that if we were able to turn the script into a book and we did it the right way at the right time, we could have a bestseller that would then influence the sales of the tickets for our movie.
Right. Smart.
And they said yes. We found a great writer. We took the script that we had written and developed and turned it into a book. The book was released 3 months before the movie. It was #1 for a year. And of course, our little $7 million movie went on to make over 90 at the global box office. And somehow it all worked. Unfortunately, my friend Claire passed away just before I could show her the film.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She had actually had a double lung transplant, as the character does at the end of the movie. But in real life, she actually didn't make it through. So the movie was dedicated to her, and helped raise a lot of awareness and money for CF. So it was a win.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a really great film that, I'm sure that's a huge part of the reason it made that, 90+ million, is just the film on its own 2 feet was really wonderful.
It was a love letter, man. It was a love letter to her. And I had not just two, they were all wonderful actors. And I learned so much. Making that movie. I made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
And it was so hard, but man, it just feels so good to know that it's out there in the world, and to hear all the people that feel seen, from that film.
Yeah, absolutely. And the love letter that you talk about, the passion and empathy, really does ooze out of the screen from that film. Like, you really can feel it in every frame, and just as much so in your latest film, Clouds. I was really touched by this film. I thought it was so impactful, and for me, it did all the things that you're talking about, that you're saying you're setting out to do. So I would love to shift and talk a bit about that one. And I think you hinted at it already of how Clouds came about. It sounds like that was something a long time coming that was seeded in you, but could we talk a little bit about that one of what was the inception of that becoming a film?
Yeah. So after the documentary I made about Zach Sobiech went viral, and if you don't know, so Clouds is about a 17-year-old musician named Zach Sobiech who is living with osteosarcoma and finds out that he only has, he has less than a year to live. And it's a musical journey. It's a coming of age story where he finds his voice. And, after the documentary went viral, his mom, Laura, wrote a book called Fly a Little Higher, and stayed very close to the family. But before Zach passed away, I made him a promise, and I told him that I would do whatever I could to make sure that I told his story, and that the world knew his name and heard his music, and that we would raise money for his fund, the Zach Sobiech Osteosarcoma Fund, which he set up before he passed away. So I optioned the book, and so many magical things happened that made it possible. We first had set it up at Relativity, and then Relativity went bankrupt, but The executive there, who became a dear friend, fought to get it out for us because she was like, you have to make this movie. And, and like the day before they went bankrupt, we got the IP back, and then we set it up at Warner Brothers. And at one point I was going to actually make that before 5 Feet Apart. And both movies were kind of figuring out like what was, which movie was going to be made, because I was actually still working as an actor. So I only had 3 months to make the movie in between seasons of Jane the Virgin. And the reason we made 5 Feet Apart first, little inside baseball, was because the Warner Brothers wasn't comfortable with me editing the movie while I was also shooting Jane the Virgin as an actor. And CBS Films could have given two shits. They just wanted to make the movie.
Right.
So when I made 5 Feet Apart, when I got back after shooting it, funny story, I actually set up my edit bay in a vacant dressing room from a show that was canceled on the same floor as my dressing room. So in between scenes, I would actually be editing that movie.
Oh, nice.
I would go and act on Jane the Virgin. Then I would come back and we'd spend an hour and a half editing, and then I'd go act again, and then I'd come back. And we did that for 4 months, I think. And I'll never do that again.
I was going to say, how exhausting was that?
It was very hard. I mean, it was so hard, especially because it was the final season of the show. It was really hard. And then you're balancing like, notes and table reads and, who am I? I'm So anyways, so Clouds ended up going after. And what ended up happening with Clouds was we made the movie originally with Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers was deeply invested and loved this project. And we went out and we made it. And it was an incredible experience. The family was intimately involved. When we made this movie, it was really important to me because, again, Zach was so close to me and we're dealing with real people.
Yeah.
I just wanted this film to have something that, like, after you watched it, you didn't know what it was, but you felt taken care of. You felt like there was something different about this movie that you can't quite explain. And the way I describe it is the difference between like my Nana's cooking. So I'm Italian.
Yeah.
And my Nana would make pasta. Now I could go to the restaurant down the street, a great Italian restaurant, and order the same pasta that she made, but it would never taste as good as my Nana's. And that was because my Nana made it with love.
Yeah.
She made it with the intention that she just wanted to fill my stomach and my heart. And when I think about like how I want to make movies, specifically Clouds, I wanted Zach's footprint and his family's footprint all over this thing. And I know it sounds hippy dippy, but like in like an energetical way. So I'll give you an example. Like I had all the cast meet the real people. I brought the actor who played Zach in to meet the family and spend time in Zach's room. I had Finn wear Zach's clothes. They both happened to be exactly the same height and weight. They were both 6'1".
Wow.
So we used Zach's real wardrobe in the movie. So in the movie, when the character is recording Clouds for the first time, he's wearing a red plaid shirt. He's wearing the shirt that Zach recorded Clouds in for the first time.
Oh, that's incredible.
Because I believe that there's something magical about filmmaking, man, that we can capture things that you can't see, but you can feel.
Yes.
And the whole movie is filled with Easter eggs like that. Like at the end of the movie, there's a big concert performance, and spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen the film, Zach's unable to finish a song and the crowd comes in a very emotional moment.
Yeah.
But the first voice you hear that's finishing the song for Zach is actually the real Sammy, who was his writing partner, who is portrayed in the movie by Sabrina Carpenter. She was in the audience along with 70 of Zach's friends and family.
Wow.
We had brought everybody up from Minnesota to Montreal where we made the movie. And, we had a day with like 500 extras, and we had all of Zach's extended family and friends there dressed up in the audience, scattered around with all the extras. So when that choir of people come in to sing Clouds, it's actually Zach's family and friends singing it. Man. It's the real voices.
That's incredible.
It's not something that you would ever know watching the movie, but I think it does something energetically to the experience. And I think it just touches your heart in a different way. And I just believe what comes from the heart hits the heart.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think, you're exactly right. I think it does come across because I didn't know any of that watching the film, but there was something so honest. There was something extra coming across where at times films like these can feel overly sentimental, and it never did to me. It felt true to life. It felt like I really was watching this life well lived, and it all just, that honesty really created much more impact for me. But everything you're saying, makes me think about how much pressure there must have been to bring this story that was, so, close to you and true. Zach's true, like his family, they were involved. How did you go about adapting that? Like, were there things that you used or just people that you surrounded yourself with to make sure you maintained that honesty and told his story as well as you did?
It's an amazing question. I felt all the pressure. I have a lot more gray hair than I did before I started.
Yeah, I bet.
It was a bounty, man. That's the only way I can describe it. Is I'm gonna get really spiritual and hippy dippy on you.
Yeah, do
So
it.
please forgive me.
No, go.
Fundamentally, I believe that when we die, we don't disappear. I believe that when we pass on to wherever we're going next, we just transform. And I believe that it's very similar to the womb, right? When my wife was pregnant with my daughter, she was alive. She was having her entire experience in this womb. She was developing all of these things. And yet here I was aware of her, but she wasn't aware of me. And I could play her music and talk to her and pray for her.
Yeah.
And I was right. And she was, literally inches, centimeters away at times, unaware that I existed, but I was able to influence her. And then she was born into this world. And suddenly she needs all these things she was developing for this world. And she's here with me and we're together. And one day I'm going to pass on. And wherever I'm going to be, I believe is as different as this world is to the womb. And I believe that where I go next, I'm going to be able to influence her life in the same way as I did while she was in the womb.
Yeah.
Because I believe, based on my faith and the Baha'i faith, that we're here. We just can't see them. So I look at this project and I look at Zach, and as crazy as it sounds, I have been talking to Zach for years and asking him for help and for guidance and to show me the way and to give me ideas and to help me make decisions and to help me tell his story the way he wanted it to be told. So that looks really crazy, especially when you have a director and a producer who's like, holding meetings with 40, 50 people. And I'm saying things like, I want you all to listen to Zach.
Right.
I want you to look for the magic because he's going to show up for you if you are open to it.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of atheists on this project who by the end of this movie said, I can't even believe some of the things that have happened. Thank you. Zach changed my life or touched my heart or whatever it was, because I believe if we're open to it, we're open to the inspiration, then it comes in. And then that happens with everything. That happens, as you know, with films. You make movies, you have no idea where these ideas come from, but they come and boom. And on the 11th hour, when you're losing the light and everything's going wrong, and you have this idea and it works and it's better than the idea that you thought you had beforehand, right? There's an unexplainable, intangible, spiritual aspect to filmmaking because you have hundreds of people coming together, all working towards a common goal. And I truly believe with all my heart that if you approach filmmaking in an open way, where you're not a dictator, but you're a collaborator, and you all want the best possible thing, then whatever it is, whether it's angels or guides or whatever you believe in, or just the idea of inspiration as a whole, will find its way to you via the people that you're working with. And that's what I told everybody about Zach. I said, if I'm closed that day, Zach's going to come to you. And if you get something that you think is inspirational, you got to bring it to me.
Yeah.
I want to hear it. Because I might not be ready to hear what he has to say, but you will. And so I want to know. And I can't even tell you how many times I thought of something, but was distracted by something else. And 2 minutes later, somebody went and told me that thing. And that's how I knew, yep, got to do it. Let's move on. You know what? Sorry, guys. We're going to completely change the lighting setup, but I know it's going to work. Here's why.
Yeah.
And that's the entire film, man, even down to locations that were unavailable but then magically showed up and on the day we needed them, all kinds of crazy things. There's even a story about how I asked the actor, Zach, who played Zach, to write a song for the movie because I felt like we needed one more song, and Finn went to write a song, couldn't find the chorus, remembered that he had taken a picture of Zach's journal when I brought him to Minnesota to go into Zach's room. In the Zach's journal was an unfinished song of the 2 bars that fit the song perfectly and rhymed and were the chorus. Wow. Not only that, and then after putting the song together, went back in the journal and remembered that Zach had written chords for that song, realized that he had himself written the identical song that Zach started to write with the identical chord progression.
That's incredible.
And now there's a song on the soundtrack that's co-written by Finn and Zach because of that. Like there's just shit you could never explain. And so I go back to like how it was made or why. And the pressure, there was so much pressure, man. But I felt the entire time that I was making it with my friend.
Yeah.
He was my co-director. And that's why wherever my chair was, Zach's chair was next to me. Zach died 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But every day of this movie, there was a chair made with Zach's name on it that was right next to mine. No matter where my chair was moved, the prop department put his chair next to mine. There was an empty chair sitting there, and you better believe I feel he was sitting in that chair with me the entire time.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, man. And I really think you can, like I keep saying, you just felt it while watching the film, all the things that you're saying. And everything that you just, it reminds me of a line in the film where he says, you know, he's not a kid going down fighting, he's one going up fighting. And yeah, that just, all of that just speaks to that same, you know, bundle of energy and empathy that you all crafted with this. And I do love, just, you know, from a directing standpoint, how it didn't feel like you were ever being overly precious. It just, not to continue using the same word, but honest, you know, it always felt that way to me, even in your directorial choices, you know, how you would allow scenes to breathe. You let moments play. It's not something where you felt like you needed to cut a lot of, you know, often there was a scene that was just one shot. That's it. That's the scene. And it was so perfect and in the moment, and connected me
Thank you, man.
with the moment and with those characters in such a great way. I'm curious to know, is that something that you prepped before time? Is that something that you were finding during, sort of like what you were talking about? Those, let's say specifically two moments that really stood out to me. To honestly, I rewound and rewatched them. Was the moment he finds out he's terminal, and then the moment directly after, you know, we cut to the house and then we cut to the bathroom and him. It starts with the scar and then it comes up and then lands just, you know, him in the mirror just looking at himself. Those two moments, how did you plan those? Did you find those on the day, or were those pre-planned?
It's a great question. So both of those moments were born out of really awesome, intimate conversations with me and my DP, Ben Cutchins. Ben shot Ozark for years. Fantastic DP.
Oh, wow.
And we watched a lot of like French movies before we made this. You know, I really wanted to find a way to make a different YA-esque family movie. And, you know, I just think there's something so different about the way Europeans tell stories than the way that we do in America. And I feel like so often we think our audience is stupid, especially like young people.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I think it's what every director hates so much about working with studios is like some of these studio notes is just like, you won't even believe some of the things that, you know, we get. And I just believe in believing your audience is smart and they're with you and they get it. And if they don't, they'll figure it out. And so, yeah. So as an example, the scene with him finding out he was terminal, we wanted to shoot it. The dream was to do it as a one take, but I had extra coverage lined up on the day because I knew I was working for Warner Brothers and I didn't want them to ask me to reshoot it.
Right.
Basically. And they gave me so much agency. They never were even there. It was really, you know, I got to make the movie I wanted to make, but they had final cut originally. So we planned on trying to execute it in a way where when we got to the edit room, we could use one take, but we had extra coverage. What we learned is, of course, when we got on set and we were shooting, I didn't have time for all the coverage I needed to do. So I just had to make a choice. And the choice was, you know what, this will make the best scene for the movie if we can pull it off. Instead of trying to do 3 or 4 takes of this and then shooting like 2 other setups, let's abandon the other setups and make this fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And that's the choice every filmmaker has when they're on set, is you have to go back to what is the movie you want to make. And I think that comes down ultimately to making decisions rooted in love and abundance and not fear and scarcity. And, you know, the idea of lots of coverage is always because you want to literally cover your ass,
Right.
you know? And so we just said, fuck it. And we were like, let's go. And so we shot this. We always wanted to have them out of focus in the background because I wanted to be in Zach's POV.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be with the parents in that scene. I wanted to be with Zach and hear what he's hearing. But so much is happening in that, you know, 2 minutes where the camera's moving around and you're not moving that much, that we just worked on it. I think that was like take 8 or 9. And it's a lot for an actor to go through, but it was worth it. It was so worth it, man. And God, if we had all the time in the world and we would have done other coverage, we probably would have had to make a different choice, but we didn't. And that's kind of the awesome thing about filmmaking is you don't figure out exactly Like, unless you're right then and there and you have the pressures of 200 people waiting for you and knowing you're about to go over and knowing that you can't afford to go over and you can't afford to do that coverage and that setup's going to take an extra 15 minutes, you make the choice that's best for the movie.
Yeah.
And then the following, by the way, you mentioned my favorite scene in the movie, which is the mirror scene.
Yeah.
So,
which was a great trick. It worked beautifully.
Well, it's so rare to see, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the money to cut the camera out in a movie like this. We can't do the black swan tricks. So this was the old T2 idea, right? Where James Cameron had her twin sister, who I heard just recently passed away. God rest her soul. So what we did with that was we had always wanted to do that. In fact, that was inspired by a film my DP had shown me, a French movie that was just so beautifully shot. And the idea was, how can we as an audience feel everything he's feeling and not feel the camera?
Yeah.
And for me, the most private moments of my life have happened when no one's around and I'm by myself in front of a mirror. And there's just something so beautiful and intimate about that. But it's so hard to do without knowing that there's going to be a camera. And I wanted to find a way. How do I look directly into his eyes? And so what we did was we built a mirror set. So essentially what you're looking at is not a mirror. It is a hole into the actual bathroom set. And then we built towards the camera, on the camera side of the set, we built an extra sink and we just mirrored the set. And we brought in a double who was built just like Finn, our actor. And then we had them rehearse their movement. So it was theater. So what they were doing is they were bending down at the same time. They were brushing their teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4, spit, bend down, come up. And as they were coming up, we were pushing through the actor. And then the actor stepped out. And then there we were front and center with our actor, Finn, who was trying to get himself ready for school that day and didn't want any words, didn't want anything. I just wanted him to look at himself and try to make himself smile. And there was something, I remember shooting it, and there was just something so heartbreaking and profound about that moment, because nobody ever gets to see the moment after. Nobody ever gets to see the moment after somebody finds out they're dying.
Yeah.
And how do they brush their teeth?
Yeah.
How do they dress? Like, how do they put on their shirt? Like, what are they thinking when they're looking at themselves in the mirror before they go to school that day? And as I was in the cutting room, again, it was another weird thing. I was listening to a song, and I was on some playlist, and then this like gospel song came on. I had this random idea of like, wow, what if we set this scene to like some old gospel song? And everyone thought it was crazy. And then we put it to picture, and there was something that just worked about it.
Yeah.
And it's just weird, fucked up, really cool kind of camera trick. But I don't believe in camera tricks for the sake of camera tricks. I believe camera tricks work when you're heightening the emotion of what you want someone to feel in the scene.
Yeah.
And in this case, that was a true collaboration from Ben and I. Ben was just a brilliant DP and just got everything we were going for.
Yeah, I agree too. And it's like the same thing with visual effects, put it there for no reason just because it's cool and it just doesn't work. But it was one of those ones where I didn't catch it at first. It was so well done. And then, like I said, I rewatched the scene, and at the end of rewatching that scene a second time, I was like, wait a minute. That's not physically possible. How did that happen? So it worked so well too. Cause I'm looking at the scar, and that's a part of what he just went through, and his realization. And then how you just tracked in so close and let us sit with him for a moment, like you said, dialogue free, and gave the audience the chance to really process what he's going through and what he's thinking. I just thought it was so impactful, which I felt, the film as a whole very much felt like that to me. It's kind of wrapped up in.
That means a lot, man.
Yeah,
means a lot.
It's kind of wrapped up in a bit of dialogue that you had in there as well. When someone tells him, it's actually, I believe it's in the documentary. I watched both, so it's a little like fused in my mind. But someone told him it's not about that you're dying. It's because of how you lived, and it feels like that's the.
That was me, by the way.
Was that you? Oh my gosh, you look so different.
I know. I told you this movie aged me.
Man, that's incredible. But it's what you said to him in that moment that I was like, man, that's the movie to me. Cause I watched the doc, cause I remember I actually did see the doc way back when.
Oh, wow.
And then, I was reminded of, cause I'm watching the movie and I'm like, wait a minute, I know this story. And the song hit and I'm like, okay, no, I absolutely know this. And I went and I looked and I rewatched the documentary after I watched the film, and it's what you said to him there that for me, that was the movie. And I felt that through the entire movie that it's how you lived. And I think, I think you really honored his life in how you made this film. And I think you also gave us this beautiful gift of perspective of, what you were saying earlier is films like this for me end, and it reminds me of the point of every single day, who we're spending it with and how we're impacting them. And that's what I think is the most beautiful thing about film, is when it can be that, that source of perspective for us, where it can be that reminder of, this thing that happened today doesn't matter. What matters is how you treat your wife, your kids, what you do for others,
That's it.
And so, I mean, really, I'm just saying this to thank you for making the film and, giving me that gift again, that reminder, that perspective, because I really do think you very much honored his story, and you very much knocked this film out the park.
Oh, bro, that really means a lot to me. It made me think of one of my best friends and business partners told me once that the Arabic word for human is insan, which is translated. One of the translations is they who forget. So the idea that as human beings, like the word for humans in one of the oldest languages in the world means they who forget. We are forgetful, right? Yeah. We're insane. We are forgetful. We forget everything. We forget the purpose of life. We forget our motivation for living. We forget that we were created by something bigger than ourselves. And the whole point of life then is in the remembering. And so what you brought up means so much to me, because that's why I make movies. I want people to remember. That's it. Remember how beautiful your life is. Remember how grateful you are to be able to walk without a limp. Remember that you are breathing, right? 5 feet apart at its core was about being able to take a freaking breath. Yeah. Remember that you can touch the person that you love freely, right? And it's not until these things are taken away that we realize what we had, right? It's not until COVID-19 hit and we're in quarantine and suddenly we can't touch people or see people that we love that we realize how much we loved people and desired human connections. It's not until you find out you're dying that so often you choose to start living. What if we didn't have to? What if movies could do that for us, right? Yeah. And that's what I just aspire to. And I think that's why what you said resonates and means so much to me, man, is like, that's all I want. I want people to leave my movies and remember, Yeah. So thank you for saying that, and for saying that about Zach too. Cause at the end of the day, man, it was just, I want to make him proud. So. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you did. And again, I think people are going to get a lot out of this movie, but we are past your time. I know you had a heart out, so I'm going to end it there. But again, just thank you for making this film, and thank you for coming on the podcast to talk to us about it. I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me, and I'd love to come back and talk, man. Absolutely. I really love your podcast. Thank you for doing this. That's it for today. A huge thank you to Justin for coming on the show to talk about his journey as a filmmaker overall, but also in making this amazing film, which of course is on Disney Plus, and you could go watch that. You definitely should, but also jump over to filmriot.com/podcast. Find the episode page for this episode, and you will find more from Justin, more of his work, links that you can follow him online, but you'll also find links to the Zach Sobiech Osteosarcoma Fund, which you can find out more about what Zach set up there before he passed and be able to donate as well. So definitely jump over and find that link. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.